The number one resolution for people last year was to save more money, but nearly half gave up by February. Don't let that be you. Download Rocket Money to reach your financial goals this year. Track your spending, cut waste, and automate savings in one simple app. Rocket Money shows you all your expenses and categorizes them, so you know exactly where your money's going and where you're overspending. From there, the app cuts waste by canceling your unused subscriptions and lowering your bills. No customer service needed. With that money freed up, the app will automatically set some cash aside for your goals, whether it's an emergency fund, paying off debt, or saving for vacation. Rocket Money's got you covered. Users love the app, with over 186,000 five-star ratings. And on average, users can save up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. Make saving money a priority this year. Go to rocketmoney.com/cancel to get started. That's rocketmoney.com/cancel. rocketmoney.com/cancel.
I do know that I'm not going to vote for the Greens.
Why not Green?
Because 2 weeks ago, when the entourage were in a cafe, they walked out of the cafe and didn't close the door behind them.
Do you think? Okay. They should have done that, I know, but is that a reason not to vote for the candidate?
Actions speak louder than words.
Quiet Riot. Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot Sunday School, the red top column to Thursday's feature-length op-ed. I'm Naomi.
And I'm Kerry, and I'm absolutely knackered trying to keep up with everything that's going on in the world this week.
Do you know, I thought of you. I read about Cornwall, or a part of Cornwall having had like 71 consecutive days of rain.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, parts of the Highlands have basically had a drought. Now, you don't live in Cornwall, you live in Devon, but have you made the wrong move?
Devon, but we've had a lot of rain here as well. I think it's like 42 or 47 consecutive days as well. It's measured at Exeter Airport, which has been underwater half the time, it seems.
Oh, God.
The joy of having a base in the Highlands of Scotland and a base in the south of England is you can pick your climate catastrophe. So I've been stuck with my welly boots on down here. Frankly, I know it's about 9 degrees colder up in the Highlands where my house is.
True.
And I'd rather just dress for the wet than shiver in the cold.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I'm a softie.
London is and the microclimate, the central London heat island, is about as cold as I can take it. I've realised, having grown up in Northern Ireland, having gone to university in Leeds, I think I'm only ever going to migrate one direction, and that is south. So
you've redefined being a southern softie. Well done.
Would I? I don't know. I mean, the annoying thing about the rain has been there's been no point in blow drying your hair. And anytime you have to put the effort into it, you look like crap within half an hour, wish you hadn't bothered. So I can't wait for the rain to ease up a bit. But I really, really dislike being cold. I don't know.
It's contrast, though, isn't it? If you take the contrast out of the weather, it's like taking the contrast out of anything else in life. Your food, your wardrobe, whatever. Take the contrast out and it all gets a bit meh. Mm-hmm. But, you know, we'd have to find something else to complain about.
Yeah.
Which there is much.
Yeah. What are we going to talk about?
Well, I'm guessing you might want to just touch on the Andreou Mountbatten-Windsor arrest.
Absolutely. But it is also an election week because we've got the Gorton and Denton by-election happening in a couple of days. Mm-hmm. And with it, a lot of speculation, seat level polls coming out, etc. Is it the Greens? Is it Labour? Who might be able to defeat reform? So I wanted to dive into a bit of work that YouGov have put out, which is a huge piece of research they've done on tactical voting.
And if we've got time, we could always throw in the sort of tiny third topic of the Third World War and look at the growing threat of US attacks on Iran and why and how that's causing Keir Starmer yet another headache over the Chagos deal.
Okay, Kenny, that is a lot of meat. Let's throw this show on the grill. Quiet Riot. On Thursday morning, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor was arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. Royal properties were searched and the King gave the nod to a full and thorough investigation. After nearly 11 hours of questioning, the former prince was released, and Reuters packed unflattering pictures of him in the back of his getaway vehicle that splashed almost every front page on Friday. He was released under investigation rather than on bail, meaning there is little restriction on his movement, and he's currently holed up in Sandringham, much to the dismay, I'm sure, of the extended royal family, whose own reputation is being dented by association. It is expected he'll be brought back in for further questioning at some point, and royal properties continue to be searched. He is, of course, the first senior member of the royals in modern history to be arrested. The last time it happened, about 350 years ago, another King Charles was on the throne, King Charles I, and he was charged with treason during the English Civil War, of course, put on trial, found guilty, and sentenced to death. Now, we're not saying the British public expect the same treatment for Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, but we're not saying it either. So, where do these latest developments leave the House of Windsor, our constitutional arrangements, and, most importantly, justice for Epstein's victims? Kenny, presumably when uniformed officers arrived at his premises on the morning of his 66th birthday, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor assumed someone had hired them as like stripograms.
Whoa, too soon, Naomi. Good. Okay, well, look, we've got a little bit of lightness to kick off a very serious topic. I think in terms of other things about what happened at Mountbatten-Windsor's pad, I'd like to give a shout out to the Reuters photographer who you mentioned.
Yeah.
Who, he captured that image that's on all the front pages. He's called Phil Noble. I know his work, and it's great, isn't he? And he drove from Manchester. It's 5 or 6 miles. Hours,
all the way down to Norfolk. Yeah.
And then he was on his way to hotel when he got another tip off that things were happening, and he grabbed 6 shots, and only one of them showed anything. But what he showed was history.
More seriously, we assume that the arrest is following findings in the Epstein files that relate to his conduct while trade envoy, possibly sharing sensitive information with him. Can you tell us, what do we know? And could there, potentially be a lot more to this? For instance, once investigators have access to Andrew's own email rather than just Epstein, they could find out that he was giving this information to many more people than just Jeffrey Epstein, no?
Yeah, I mean, yes, is the answer to that. I mean, firstly, the investigations as they stand do relate to the allegations of misconduct in public office. They're not directly linked to the allegations of sexual impropriety that prompted the palace to get involved in that £12 million payoff to Virginia Giuffre back in 2022.
Yeah.
Now, to your second question on whether there could be much more to this, oh yes, the fire that's been burning under Andrew for years is now well beyond his control. And there are a couple of ways that this gets worse for him. Firstly, and most obviously, now that the investigators have got access to files, to laptops, and a whole bunch of other stuff, we've got no idea what they will or will not stumble on in terms of the secrets that Mountbatten-Windsor is alleged to have been sharing.
It could clearly get a lot worse for him, but presumably for other people.
Exactly. So the core investigation is into those allegations around sharing secrets that he shouldn't have been sharing. But there's a second, much messier way that this gets even worse as well. If, just say, for example, it was to transpire that a convicted sex trafficker was using young girls to attract well-connected individuals whom he could then pump for information, that blows open a whole new line on investigations. And those can be extremely difficult because the questions then wouldn't be limited simply to did a well-connected person share information illegally, but would inevitably spread to with whom did he share the information? What was the information used for? And really crucially, who else was that information passed to and what did they do with it? So in the world of high finance, I don't even know if it's possible to make these sorts of links, but that's kind of a moot point because the key here is that hidden by all those redactions in the Epstein files are a lot of powerful people. Currently, they're protected by the approach that's being taken by the United States authorities. The Mountbatten-Windsor probe, well, that could drop them in the spotlight and link them explicitly and very, very publicly to Epstein. And once their names are out there officially, it's open season.
Yeah. And what about all of the close protection? It is actual serving police officers who do the protection for the royal family and other dignitaries, former prime ministers, etc. If they were witness to crime as it was happening and didn't speak up, whether that is the trafficking of women or worse still, girls, and didn't blow the whistle at the time, presumably they could all get embroiled in this too.
That's absolutely central. And it's central not just from a legal perspective, it's central from a communications perspective as well. And there's a couple of issues to unpick here. A critical issue here that even a pro-monarchy press would find hard to brush under the shag pile is the fact that the royal family have already punished Mountbatten-Windsor. It's why we now call him Mountbatten-Windsor and not Prince Andrew. Then there's the uncomfortable truth about that 12 million payoff to Virginia Giuffre. We don't know the exact details, but it's widely accepted to have been some sort of intra-royal whip round of sorts, involving a loan, the late Queen, the Duke of Edinburgh's estate, and so on. So the palace had reason to act long before the police did. Why? And that leads to some really very basic questions. If any listeners ever watch Slow Horses.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Jackson Lamb takes the sort of basic journalistic questions and he calls them the 5 Fs. Who the fuck, what the fuck, when the fuck, where the fuck, and why the fuck? And those 5 Fs absolutely are going to be camped outside Buckingham Palace.
Well, you're the comms guy. I mean, this is your area of speciality. The firm has followed the mantra, never complain, never explain. But they've got some bloody explaining to do now, don't they? That now no longer holds. Where do you think it leaves them as an institution?
As an institution, it's the end of Charles's ambitions to leave his mark, a positive mark on the monarchy. That's it. He doesn't have that much time, and this is his era, full stop. More than ever, Kate and Wales will be seen by monarchists as the last great hope for the institution. Now, if, as seems quite likely, there are moves to cut Mountbatten-Windsor out of his 8th in line to the throne status, then the door opens on all sorts of constitutional questions, not just here, but, in the Commonwealth as well. So the royal family, they're going to have to suffer publicly, and that may well mean an acceleration of plans to slim the whole thing down, to modernise it, and a tricky one, this, to make it more accountable, because we now know that they're not untouchable.
They're not completely unaccountable and unable to change. I mean, the monarchy has up to now survived because it bends before it tends to break. Male primogeniture, that went, 15 years ago?
Yeah.
The ban on marrying Catholics scrapped. That awful year of 1992 where all of the exposure was around the Queen not paying tax. She then agrees to start paying some tax. And of course, as you mentioned, the fact that they've already stripped Mountbatten-Windsor of his regal title. Surely stripping his right to ascend the throne could be a natural extension of these kinds of changes. I mean, what is he, 8th in line?
8th in line, yeah.
So it's unlikely, highly unlikely, but I guess not beyond.
Somebody poisons the port at a Christmas bash. He's not invited,
there we go.
Anything's possible in this crazy world.
Shouldn't Parliament be signalling that democratic principle must beat hereditary privilege, and therefore also go a bit further, finish the job, slim this thing down big time? Because I think the audience is quite big for it now. I think you've been looking at some of the polling. People are pretty, keen on change within the royal family. They don't like it as they did.
You've asked me what I think it means for the palace. I know you've probably got some very distinct views on where you think it leaves them now, and about how important is the way they react as an institution, as well as how they react as a family over the next few days. Or do you think they are fatally wounded now?
I think they are. The Constitution hasn't collapsed. It needs to radically change. It's creaking. Weeks ago, we had ministers talking about the emergency bill to get Mandelson's peerage off him. Now, let's take any threat of King Andrew away from probability. And yet, you've also got this huge fragmentation, and we're going to be talking about that in a bit, of party affiliation.
Yeah.
Yet a stupid first past the post voting system that doesn't serve that fragmented political landscape. And I just think the firm, the royal family, need to realize we are in quite a populist age now. We don't have deep-rooted sentimental attachment to our political parties,
No.
to crown and country, in the way that we did in years gone by. That risk was always there with the passing of the Queen. But the Queen looks pretty complicit in helping cover up a lot of Andrew's indiscretion at best and crime at worst. So I don't know that it is the end of the House of Windsor, but I mean, the end has now become much more thinkable.
That's such an important point that you've touched on. We touched on it right at the beginning as well, but this idea that people in the palace and those around those in the palace knew what was going on. And we know that they knew what was going on because they finally acted. They were forced to take action. Andrew, we should be really clear, Andrew wasn't operating as a trade envoy in some sort of vacuum. Senior royals have got private secretaries, they've got officials, they've got oversight structures. And already the dogs are circling the most obvious targets. That's Mountbatten-Windsor's police protection officers, whose jobs involved them literally being by his side. And, if warning signs existed and were picked up by those in the hinterland of Andrew, then there's only two outcomes. Either they didn't notice what was going on and would have to view that as being a governance failure of some sort, or they did notice that something was amiss and they chose containment over exposure. And that points to something far, far darker.
There's clearly, we think, a bit of tension between William, the reformer in waiting, and Charles, the more traditionalist. Imagine you are called up this afternoon, Kenny Campbell, former editor of the Metro, we need you to come and give crisis comms advice to Buckingham Palace.
They really do now.
What would you tell them to do?
It's a phenomenal challenge because they're so up to their necks in it. I mean, first of all, there's an anchor point in that the police investigation has to run its course. Charles has set out his stall in that respect. And that's a legitimate course of action to take, which buys them a little bit of time. But what it doesn't do from a comms perspective is fill the media vacuum. So Charles, I would be recommending, has to at least pledge a root and branch review of royal operations. And William, he has to be at the forefront of it. Now, that's the royal side of it. I would also say that there must be an external element to this too, because the royals marking their own homework simply isn't going to cut it now. And, at its most serious, this is an existential threat to the monarchy as we know it. And no, I say the monarchy because it's conceivable that the royal family could be defenestrated, House of Windsor goes, but the monarchy as an institution remains, if not untouched, still remains at the top of the pile. Because whether we like it or not, the monarchy survives by consent. And if it refuses to subject itself to some very taxing scrutiny, others are going to do that work. And sure as eggs is eggs, that consent that we give as a nation to the monarchy will start to vanish like snow in the spring.
And finally, we've got to remember the victims, the women and girls that Epstein and his associates abused. Andrew was arrested, of course, on suspicion of misconduct in public office, which does carry a maximum sentence of life. But Kenny, what do we know about why they're going for him on this and nothing alleged by Virginia Giuffre and others, for example, that he's being investigated for?
It's a classic example of having to deal with the world that we live in as opposed to the world that we might want to live in. Giuffre's allegations, they were pursued as a civil case in the United States, not as a UK criminal prosecution. And that's the case that ended up with a financial settlement back in 2022. So there was never a UK criminal charge brought in relation to these allegations. So for UK prosecutors to act now, on historical sexual offence claims, they would need, and lawyers listening, feel free to correct me if I've got this wrong, but my understanding is they need admissible evidence meeting the criminal standard of proof. That's difficult.
And also, it's different, right? Because the age of consent in the UK is lower than in the USA. So what may have been a criminal act in Florida, for instance, wouldn't necessarily have met the threshold for it in London.
That's right. The bar is incredibly high to meeting the level required for a criminal standard of proof. And let's not forget that when events are alleged to have taken place abroad a whole lot of years ago, and the chief accuser has died, that bar gets ever, ever higher. So that's the practical and legal element, and it's important. But there's the other side, and there's the fact that our systems, let's face it, they just don't seem to believe women who accuse men like Epstein of heinous crimes, but they do get triggered by stuff that involves money.
Or men like Mohammed Al-Fayed.
Yeah, the list goes on.
Right now, we still have all these women and girls who are
completely,
without any kind of justice over what happened in Harrods.
But if I take my angry hat off, and I do wear a very angry hat on this one, but put on the practical hat, you use the tools at your disposal to ensnare criminals. It's the Al Capone approach. You get them for tax evasion if you can't get them for violent crime. It should be said that, misconduct in public office isn't exactly a parking ticket offence, though, as you've hinted. It goes up to life imprisonment in general. You wouldn't expect that. But for somebody who's just turned 66, it's not a great age to start a prison sentence of any length.
Quiet, Riot. You didn't start a business just to keep the lights on. You're here to sell more today than yesterday. You're here to win. Lucky for you, Shopify built the best converting checkout on the planet. Like the just one tapping, ridiculously fast acting, sky-high sales stacking, champion of checkouts. That's the good stuff right there. So if your business is in it to win it, win with Shopify. Start your free trial today at shopify.com/win.
Quiet, Riot. Well, this week brings the first by-election of 2026, hurrah, in Gorton and Denton. And already it feels like a test case for the shape of progressive politics in the years ahead. Gone are the days of it being obvious about who to back to stop the other obvious one from winning. Now, voters in the progressive bloc, they're tying themselves in knots. Do they back the incumbent Labour Party or the insurgent Greens? And how do they avoid splitting the vote and letting Matt Goodwin in through the middle? It's the kind of tactical dilemma that turns WhatsApp groups febrile and leaves even seasoned politics watchers unsure which way to jump.
I'm thinking of going for reform. Matthew Goodwin imported material here.
I think the Labour have a good support for the immigrant people.
Andy Berman, if he would have come, I was going to vote for him. But if he's not that, I'm voting for reform.
Now, all that confusion lands just as new research from YouGov digs into how voters are thinking about tactical voting in a fragmented 5-party system. The polling suggests that old assumptions, in other words, anti-Tory or anti-Farage voters will simply coalesce around the strongest progressive bloc challenger, they no longer hold the same sway. Voters are more volatile, more expressive, and in some cases, more willing to send a message, even when the stakes are very, very high. The data, it raises some awkward questions for Labour strategists who may be banking on an informal progressive alliance when push comes to shove. So, we're going to unpick what that new Gov work is really telling us about shifts in voter behaviour and whether Labour can genuinely rely on Liberal Democrat and Green supporters holding their nose at the next general election to stop Nigel Farage getting the keys to number 10. The question is tactical voting becoming harder to coordinate? The next question is anti-reform sentiment enough to overcome distrust of Labour? And what does Gorton and Denton tell us about how the left navigates a multi-party battlefield? Oh my goodness, Naomi, that's a lot of stuff to get through. Now, you love your data, thank goodness, because you're up to your neck in this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
What do we know about Gorton and Denton in terms of who's likely to be ahead?
Fuck all. Anyone who tells you otherwise, ignore them. Look, Omnisis did a seat poll on Friday. relatively small sample, big error margin. It had the Greens ahead of Reform and Reform ahead of Labour, but all pretty much neck and neck.
Right.
There might be another seat poll dropping before this show goes out. I'm not sure. If it has gone out, go and check my Blue Sky, because I will have probably shared it there. The risk remains Reform coming through the middle. Now, I'm told the Muslim vote is holding up quite well for Labour.
Okay.
And certainly if Reform are saying, well, it's between us and the Greens, you can probably assume their data is showing it's actually them v Labour. That isn't to say the Greens don't have a good candidate who is performing well. And yeah, look, unless you are actively up there yourself canvassing a large chunk of the constituency, both the more affluent Gorton bit and the slightly less affluent Denton bit, or the more multiracial Gorton bit and the whiter Denton bit, then I doubt you've got a proper feel for it. So as ever, a lot of it is going to come down to turnout on the day, who can motivate their voters out the door. And there is a 100% chance of rain, according to the BBC, for next Thursday. So that might literally dampen turnout.
My instinct is hurrah for a proper by-election, and a genuine reason to stay up late and watch whatever various nonsense is coming in the wee small hours. Don't be contacting me on Friday morning because I'll be snoring. Are we overestimating how rational voters are when it comes to tactical voting? Because we kind of get it. We sort of make our livelihoods banging on about this sort of stuff. But are vibes trumping strategy out there?
I mean, look, first of all, you and I are talking about it, but every fucker's talking about it. Every commentator, tactical. Right, okay, well then talk about PR. If you are so obsessed with who's going to vote which way and why and can they be persuaded or not, then you really should be talking and making the case very, very strongly for equal votes, so that votes matter and none of us have got to fart around trying to guess who's actually the one to back in this ridiculous game of 4D chess that we play at election time. Tactical voting works when everyone knows which party is best placed to defeat the one they don't really want. So in Denton and Gorton, for Tory voters, that's really clear. If they don't want Labour, they've got to vote Reform.
Right.
But for Lib Dems, Greens, and probably a decent chunk of Labour who do not want Reform, they're going to be confused, whether it's Green, whether it's Labour, who they should turn out for. And all of that assumes, in a by-election setting, how much they actually care about the outcome and stopping Reform. Their primary motive might be to give the government a kicking without risking who is actually in government. Or it could be to stop Farage gaining any more momentum ahead of the local elections this year or national elections in a few years' time. And this is one of the many reasons why we can never read across too much from a by-election to the national picture. But I do think vibes might end up being more important than critical thinking when it comes to voting on Thursday and beyond. It definitely, my vibe is that vibes are having a bigger impact on people than they've ever done before.
I mean, I'm confused. I look at the data coming out of Gorton and Denton, and it's just all over the place in some ways. I don't remember anything like it in recent times. But that YouGov research that you were referencing, does it suggest that progressive voters, let's play to our audience, does it suggest that they're less willing to hold their nose than they were, say, in 2019 or 2024?
We'll leave a link in the show notes so everyone can go and read it. I mean, no, but there are differences. So of those who still back the Labour Party, they are the most willing to vote tactically to stop Reform.
Right.
Greens and Lib Dems a little bit less so, but they more or less seem to get the assignment, right? So you've got up to 3/4 of Labour voters saying they would vote Lib Dem or Green to stop either the Tories or Reform from winning in their constituency, whereas it's only about 58% of Lib Dem and Green voters who would vote tactically for Labour to stop Reform winning, and even fewer who would vote Tory who would vote Labour to stop the Tories winning. So about 45%. So, you've got kind of 10% drop between where Labour voters are. So they are very highly motivated, a little bit less so Lib Dem Green and others to stop Reform. And then again, Tories were really not seen as that motivating factor in the way that Reform are. What is interesting is that when voters are asked who they back, when only two parties have a chance in their seat, Reform lose to every other option.
Right.
Lib Dems beat every other option, and Greens beat every other option except the Lib Dems.
Zooming out a little bit, and with the caveat that I know that using by-elections to predict anything on a national scale is fraught with danger, and I know that trying to predict anything in politics 2 years, 3 years down the line is fraught with danger. Nevertheless, do we think that Labour's making a bit of a strategic mistake if it assumes that Lib Dem and Green voters will ultimately fall in line come the general election?
Without question. Labour lost 3 local authority by-elections last Thursday, all to different parties, mobilising disaffected voters on their Liberal left flank. Right? In the middle of the country, they lost to the Greens in Leicester, where you've got a big Muslim vote.
Yeah.
In the north, they lost badly to the Lib Dems in Redcar, and in Wales, they lost to Plaid and Caerphilly. So that McSweeney strategy of marginalising the left flank to go after more socially conservative voters on the Reform curious end is backfiring in actual elections that are actually happening.
You wouldn't want to be in charge of that particular strategic
No.
army right now, would you? You really wouldn't. I mean, look, the fact is that if Reform can win in places like this because of some sort of progressive fragmentation, we should be asking ourselves whether that is fundamentally reshaping the path to a Labour majority of any sort, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, Reform will need things to go their way in Gorton and Denton. And what do I mean by that? They're going to need to dominate completely in Denton, where you've got a whiter, more working class constituent, I think. They're going to need a really even split between Labour and the Greens in the more Manchester-facing wards in Gorton, because you've got 2 local authorities, you've got Tameside and recurring. And you're going to need lower turnout in less Reform-friendly areas. So basically, they need a perfect storm to win. But, that perfect storm could happen, and with low turnout, you may only need 28% of the electorate to get you there if the other 2 are splitting things and another 4th place, candidate has a late surge or whatever. So I think it'll go down to the wire for them. But if Labour are defeated, it is a complete disaster for Starmer. It doesn't really matter whether that's the Greens or Reform who inflict it, because it's not even a year really since Runcorn was lost.
That's right. So easy to forget.
Another one where, typical Labour seat, Labour majority, big Labour area, you would not expect them to lose. And so it will add to this drumbeat that's going to get louder and louder as we get to Welsh election, Scottish election, local elections in May. And I think will, obviously really be sharpening backbenchers' minds. However, it could be that on a significantly reduced majority, Labour hold the seat. That will be a sigh of relief for Starmer, but maybe potentially quite frustrating for those waiting in the wings who, want him to be suffered another blow because they don't think he's the guy to take them all the way through to the general.
It would be fast if it does come through, but with a hugely reduced share of the vote, because it's always dangerous, I think, to look on these things as being victories. You go, they won and were expected to lose, when actually the key is that they won, but they shed votes, as we said, right at the top of this piece, left, right and centre. And that sort of chaos in an electorate makes it very, very difficult to draw together any sort of cohesive electoral plan for a party the size of Labour, with the baggage that it's now carrying with the electorate as well. Should we be optimistic? Should we just wait and see?
I think we have to wait and see. I think if I had to call it right now, I would probably say Labour win on a tiny majority, but I'm preparing myself for another Reform MP and bloody Matt Goodwin as well. Although A rumor was circulating before we recorded that he's got some other scandal coming out this week.
Oh,
I couldn't stand it up. I looked around to see if it was,
Sunday
anything of any
newspapers.
significance. Yeah, but you never know. I guess if anyone is sat on something, they're going to drop it before he goes to, his name is on the ballot paper on Thursday. So watch this space.
Quiet, Riot.
Instagram teen accounts have automatic protections for what teens see and who can contact them, plus time management tools. And Instagram will continue adding built-in safety features to help create age-appropriate experiences. Learn more about teen accounts and Instagram's ongoing work to protect teens online at instagram.com/teen accounts.
Quiet, Riot.
And so, the inexorable build-up of American military hardware in the Middle East continues unabated. On Friday, the world's largest aircraft carrier, the USS General R. Ford, sailed into the Mediterranean. Longer than the Eiffel Tower is tall and powered by 2 nuclear reactors, the vessel headed for a corner of the world that already has the Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group in the Arabian Sea. The US also has dozens of aircraft in the area, or airborne control centers, stealth jets, sundry fighter jets, tankers, cargo planes too. It's the largest surge in US air power in the Middle East since the 2003 Iraq War. And that should make us all very concerned. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has thrown the UK's Chagos deal into doubt, launching a broadside at the plan that would see the UK hand over the Chagos Islands to Mauritius and lease back a joint UK-US military base for about £100 a year.
President Trump just said on Truth Social that it would be a big mistake for the UK to hand over control of Chagos Islands to Mauritius. But the State Department earlier this week has said the U.S. does support that handover. So does this post now suggest that the U.S. does not, or that President Trump has changed his mind on this?
The post should be taken as the policy of the Trump administration. It's coming straight from the horse's mouth. When you see it on Truth Social, you know it's directly from President Trump. That's the beauty of this president and his transparency and relaying this administration's policies to all of you and to the rest of the world.
So what's the link between Iran and the Chagos deal? Well, Trump has said the Diego Garcia base in the Chagos and the RAF Fairford Air Base near Swindon could both be used if America was to bomb Iran. And according to the Times, our government has not given permission for the Fairford base, which is one of 13 US Air Force bases in the UK, to be used in such a strike. And so Trump has, in effect, thrown a huff. What a surprise, eh?
Well, I mean, Kenny, this whole thing feels like it's getting murkier and murkier by the minute as I read about it. But can you give us a bit of a reminder about the Chagos for those that maybe aren't quite as up to speed with it as well? It's an archipelago. We've got the vital island of Diego Garcia there, and the Brits have controlled it since 1960. But where are we at now? What's happening with the deal? I thought Trump was in favour of it.
Well, we all thought that America in general was in favour of it because to everybody except the Chagosians, it looked like it was not a bad deal. I mean, we should remind ourselves that the base at Diego Garcia remains one of the most important American facilities outside the continental United States. They use it for bomber deployments, they use it for naval logistics, and they use it for a whole lot more besides. And this is the stuff we don't get to hear about. It's essentially the sort of place that the Official Secrets Act was absolutely designed for.
And like when you look at it on a map, it is a straight line to Iran. Like you don't have to fly over.
You could use catapults if you had enough strong elastic, yeah.
You're not going to go so detected, I don't think, as if you have to come from Cyprus over Lebanon and other allied countries to Iran.
Turkey, I suppose, is there, isn't it? But strategically it's significant for any raid on Iran, but it's globally significant in so many other ways as well, because you've got that straight line to the Indian subcontinent, to the eastern coast of Africa, to the whole of the Middle East, and those vital shipping lanes, the oil and a whole bunch of other stuff rely on staying open. So the reason that the Chagos Islands as a base is so significant isn't simply because Iran is a hot button topic at the moment, is because it plugs into the heart of geopolitical power and influence. And it also plugs into the changing balance of power. One of the fears that the West has is that if Britain eases its links with the area, then there's very little to stop China coming knocking on the door of Mauritius and saying, how about you give us one of these islands? Because you've got hundreds of them all over the place. And once the Chinese are in, nobody's pushing them out again. So there are genuine global geopolitical concerns around it.
And like, is it possible to summarize why the deal to kind of sell and lease back the Chagos worked for everybody but the Chagosians?
Look, I'm not Arthur Snell, but essentially, and I heartily recommend Behind the Lines as a podcast, Snell fans, but essentially the deal that's been talked about for some years now, basically it got the United Nations and the International Court of Justice off everyone's backs because they've said that Britain shouldn't have the Chagos Islands. So this deal got those organizations off everyone's backs, but from a geopolitical point of view, essentially everything stayed the same. There's still a base there. There's still Western influence in that belly button, if you like, of the Indian Ocean. And that's really why it was such an important and, like I say again, unless you were a Chagosian, a really quite a common sense approach.
Regardless of whether Chagos goes ahead or not, Iran is likely to face a strike soon, right? I mean, it really feels like the pressure has gone up many-fold in the last week.
Yeah. I mean, whether it faces a strike or not, that's a question that we can address specifically at the end. But in terms of the pressure, regardless of whether they push the button or not in America, it's not just rhetoric. Governments have been actively warning their citizens to get the hell out.
I saw my favourite, Donald Tusk, was saying all Polish people evacuate now. I'm not going to be able to get you out. I can't promise I can get you out if you're not out of there now.
Yeah, and his language was blunt. It was unusual. And it speaks to the sort of serious concerns around security on the ground and the potential for incredibly rapid deterioration there as well. And Poland's not alone. Several Western countries, the US, Australia, Sweden, India, others, they've issued travel advisories urging their nationals to get out of Iran or avoid travel there, amid the growing unrest in Iran itself, the growing risk of terrorism, arbitrary detention threats, and the general instability in the region as well. And there is also precedent from last year's flare-ups during the 2025 Israel-Iran confrontation. I mean, the evacuation warnings were issued then as well. And, that history is important because repeated advisories and evacuation operations really underscore that governments around the world are seeing a practical risk to their nationals, not just some sort of theoretical geopolitical dispute.
Quiet, Riot. I didn't even realize I was wasting $415 a month until I downloaded Rocket Money. I thought I had my finances under control until the app laid out all my spending and categorized it for me. Takeout, shopping, and unused subscriptions were quietly draining my account. And as a result, my savings took a back seat. But Rocket Money doesn't just tell you what you're wasting money on. It takes action to save you money. First, the app looks at your income and monthly expenses and calculates how much you can safely spend each day to stay under budget. Rocket Money also finds and cancels unwanted subscriptions for you and even negotiates better rates on your bills so you have more money in your pocket. On average, Rocket Money members can save up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. Users love the app with over 186,000 five-star ratings. It's time to simplify your finances and take control of your money. Go to rocketmoney.com/cancel to get started. That's rocketmoney.com/cancel. rocketmoney.com/cancel.
Quiet, Riot. The $1 million question, is he going to bomb Iran, and could that trigger some horrifically apocalyptic event?
To echo your answer to the question I asked in the Gorton and Denton section, no fucking idea. And nobody does. I bet Trump doesn't even know. I mean, a month ago, what we can say is that Trump lacked the military assets in the region to launch a credible strike against Iran. Now, according to various sources, the US could launch a strike and do that within days. There are some quite strong reasons that he might not do it. A limited, what they call a one-and-done strike, That already failed last summer to eliminate Iran's nuclear program, despite what the right-wing media in America were telling us at the time. The aftermath of a new strike is obviously going to be messy, it's going to be destabilizing, and it's likely to be escalatory within the region. The Gulf states are very wary of being dragged in. US public opinion isn't enthusiastic. And Trump might simply be using the threat, of course, as coercive leverage to force Tehran into a deal that he can sell as some sort of half-assed win. That's the sort of good news. The bad news is that there are also reasons that he might launch a strike. Because the military buildup that we're seeing does create momentum. Trump does appear to believe that his past strikes were successful. And Trump, we know, hates appearing weak in any way at all. So he might just calculate that regional backlash will be limited and that his domestic base wouldn't punish him or punish him any more than he is already being punished over there. So a limited initial strike, which escalates only if Iran resists meaningfully, it sounds like exactly the kind of high-risk bargaining move that someone like Trump might actually see as clever. And that leads us to sort of an uncomfortable conclusion, which is that a decision on whether America goes in or not could hinge much less on some sort of grand strategy than on Trump's own instinct for spectacle and for leverage.
Oh, God. And the fact that he's a madman. He's annoyed about the Chagos deal.
Yeah.
And reports are that it is because Starmer isn't going to let him use Diego Garcia to bomb Iran. I assume Starmer's probably had legal advice on it. We've had the Channel 4 documentary about Blair on this week, fresh in everyone's minds about how wrong it went for him after, dodgy dossiers and giving British support for US strike on Iraq. Starmer's not going to want to climb the mountain of conflict without legal cover. But I think there is also a right-wing attempt to whip up anything that might cause Starmer problem. As we recorded, Boris Johnson and Liz Truss have both been lobbying Trump to remove support for the Chagos deal. And then you've got people like James Orr, who is very, very close to Farage now, big job within Reform UK. Look him up if you aren't familiar. Very good friends with Charlie Kirk, very good friends with JD Vance.
Yeah, the usual
And I
names.
just think it's, the transnational right network causing chaos and harm wherever they can to undermine non-far right leaders like Starmer. So I'm sure Trump probably does want to use Diego Garcia. I'm sure Starmer has probably said, not so keen, need legal advice, or my legal advice says, no, this isn't gonna, bode well, shouldn't do it. And that also you've got the right wing trying to cause as many headaches for him as possible. Tell me what you know about Diego Garcia, and it's kind of
Well, it's something that I need to read more about, specifically whether there's a difference politically using Diego Garcia or allowing American aircraft to take off from somewhere like RAF Fairford, somewhere in mainland Britain. What we do know is that it's a joint UK-US facility, Diego Garcia, but sovereignty sits with the UK. All right? Even though the base is used by America for long-range bombers and all the other stuff. And it's been central to US campaigns in places like Afghanistan and Iraq. It's an active, hot place. Now, legally, the US doesn't simply press launch, no matter what Trump says. The base exists because of a bilateral treaty framework. The UK retains sovereignty and, in theory, the right to approve or withhold consent for certain uses. Now, in practice, this sort of stuff is governed by diplomatic agreement and by prior understandings, brackets, not always something you can rely upon in the Trump era, close brackets, rather than public-facing sort of veto theatrics. So if UK forces or UK territory are implicated in offensive action, ministers will take advice from the Attorney General, and they'll take advice on things like the United Nations Charter, the Self-Defense Doctrine, other UN resolutions, proportionality and necessity tests under international law, and on domestic constitutional convention on the use of force. There's a lot of questions to be answered. And, yes, if Keir Starmer was refusing US use of Diego Garcia on strikes for Iran, you can be sure he will have taken formal legal advice. Prime Ministers don't freelance on matters that could trigger regional war, or they'd be mad if they did.
Well, unless you're Tony Blair.
Well, after the Iraq experience under Tony Blair and the long, long shadow of legal controversy around that war, no smart modern PM wants to be accused of bypassing.
Do not climb the mountain of conflict.
Do not indeed.
So finally, where does this leave Starmer himself once again between a rock and a hard place?
Just the usual, isn't it, with him? It's also another reminder that when your territory hosts someone else's bombers, foreign policy stops being foreign. You know, every overseas strike will have an echo in Westminster.
Quiet Riot. And that's the end of the show for today. Thank you so much, Kenny.
And thank you as well.
And thank you, everyone, for tuning in at home.
As Alex mentioned on the main show, we've got an Ask Us Anything session looming. So if you want to be at that, do make sure you're backing us over on ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod for a $5 a month or whatever you can afford. It really is your chance to fire questions at us about anything and absolutely everything.
We will be back on Thursday with the main show and again next weekend when we'll finally know who the new MP for Gorton and Denton actually is.
How exciting. Until then, enjoy your Sunday and big love from us to you.
Bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Alex Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese.
Quiet Riot.
Just get up to first university knowledge level on 3 of the biggest stories in the country. You've got 10 minutes and go!